I'd now like to show you some examples of annotations and activities that can be used to improve student responses. So the first one I have here is a business studies HSC question. And when we were talking about the importance of showing the connections between the rubric, the question, the response and the criteria, I've got an annotated sample here that is useful, and it's been saved in the file for you to access. So first of all, with the rubric, students are being asked to demonstrate knowledge and understanding that's relevant to the question. And this has been highlighted in yellow throughout the paper. They're asked to apply hypothetical business situations, which has been highlighted in purple, communicate using relevant business terminology and concepts, so in green, and present a sustained, logical and cohesive response in the form of a business report. So this criteria is used to discriminate between exam response quality, and we want students to understand why this is important and that they need to make sure that they're familiar with this each time they start writing their response. So the stimulus question here has some information that students need to consider as they complete their response. So it indicates problems in the business that students must refer to in their response. So for example, they must apply the situation that's presented. It's important to note how the rubric connects with the marking criteria. And you can see the colours that relate down here. So the first point in the criteria is presents a sustained, logical and cohesive business report that has come straight from the rubric, that it makes effective use of the information provided, referring to the stimulus, that there's extensive knowledge and understanding that's related to the question, which links to the directive term, and clearly provides reasons in favour of human resource strategies and clearly provides reasons in favour of operations strategies. So that's the content that needs to be addressed in the response. So the directive term definition of recommend is used in the marking guidelines to provide reasons in favour of, and that's important that students can understand that. It's important to note that the question requires strategies from both syllabus topics. So there's 4 topics in business studies and 2 of them are operations and human resources. And so they need to know what those syllabus dot points are that are contained underneath each of those strategies. Here it starts to, it's using a HSC exam workbook exemplar response. So, and it's been annotated to highlight all of those things that have been done really effectively. So in a business report, structure is important because they must follow a report structure. They need to make sure that they're beginning with an executive summary and that the headings that they include throughout their response are related to the question. So it goes on to state that it's an excellent executive summary because it's immediately and explicitly engaging with the question, that it's making direct reference to the relevant syllabus topics and associated dot points, that it's making direct reference to the stimulus material, and it's using the technique of underlining key terms to draw markers' attention to the use of syllabus terms and concepts. And when I was talking about the importance of students understanding that terminology and the definitions, this ties in really strongly. We need to make sure that they have a very clear understanding of that language and terminology that needs to be being incorporated into their responses. You can see here where they're starting to talk about operations strategies, that the response is linking to the problems of the complaint that's been made, that they're referring directly to strategies within operations. And then it's explicitly stating how performance will improve, which was a key part of the question. In this section here, they're also making direct reference to the stimulus material that was provided in the question. The next annotation is making reference to this syllabus concepts of performance objectives and how it's correctly applying the relevant objective of quality to the issues at Sunshine Fruits. And so this can be applied to any response. So we have a range of HSC workbooks that faculties can have access to, but also just using exemplar responses from our students. And even if they're not in the top range, there's some strategies that we can use. We can annotate around where the strengths are, but also the weaknesses, and then use that, as I'd mentioned in the strategies PowerPoint, for students to identify those areas that could be improved and how, and then to actually do that work. So this annotation here is linking to topic sentences. It's previewing the content of the section. It's very clear. It's linking the section back to the question, which improves the coherence of the response as well. In this section here, the response clearly links an issue from the stimulus material in the question and relevant operation strategies. And then it's also explicitly stating how it will improve business performance. And this is one of the areas where our students struggle. So they will provide general information. They would be able to talk in general terms about operation strategies, but they don't answer all parts of the question. So this question is asking for recommendations. They're obviously needing to incorporate the stimulus. They need to explicitly look at the strategies, but they then need to link that to performance, and that's often the step that students miss out. Goes on to talk about that it's a good example of applying business concepts to the hypothetical business. It shows a deeper understanding and knowledge. This section here is clearly showing how achieving relevant performance objectives will improve the hypothetical business. And then using business terms very effectively, clearly showing what they mean and why they're important. Here, making good reference to the stimulus material again and giving reasons in support of the performance objective suggested. So that is an area where they're directly following the directive term in the question. So they're providing their recommendations and supporting it with reasons why they're the most appropriate. Here, it's making note of how simply and effectively the response is making a connection between A, the relevant operation strategy from the syllabus of new product design, to B, the hypothetical business Sunshine Fruits, and then to C, how it will improve the business. And it's indicating there very explicitly where those points are so students can very clearly see. It's making a note around the use of subheadings to effectively add structure and coherence to the response. Drawing attention to the fact that another operation strategy of quality control and where it is stating why this business needs to focus on quality control. It's drawing students' attention to how every paragraph contains only relevant information that directly relates to the relevant dot points from the syllabus and subtopic operation strategies, and that there is no irrelevant or unnecessary information. And again, this is an important point to make with our students, as they need to understand the importance of the syllabus and understanding the syllabus in the way they structure their responses. again, linking to the directive term in the question and highlighting how they have done that through this is a recommended strategy. And in this section here, addressing that the response does not just identify a relevant strategy, but clearly shows the how and why it can improve business performance. Using these annotated exemplars really make a difference for students' performance, because when they can see how they need to structure their responses and that this becomes a regular part of our practice with them, it helps them to clarify the differences in their writing with the exemplar and strengthens their understanding of what a good response looks like and what they need to be aiming for. And in particular, where you break down those key elements, whether it's the directive term, the terminology, the way that they're linking to the syllabus, all of those factors are really important. And you don't necessarily need to do all at once, but it forms a good checklist for students to be able to self-assess and then use their peers to peer assess as well. So as I said, this exemplar will be saved in the file, so you can use that as a guide as you annotate responses for your students to be using. So the next one I wanted to show you was I'd spoken about other ways that we can improve responses. So this one here, I'll just show you, sorry. So this is another business example that I have, but it can be applied across all subjects. So it's having students look at how they determine what directive term has been used. So here there is a sample answer that students are to read, and they're to determine which of the following questions it's attempting to answer. So is it a describe, is it an analyse, or is it a discuss? The syllabus dot points have been placed in there to draw the students' attention to those key points and how that needs to be addressed. And then students need to annotate themselves what it's a good example of. And this way, they're starting to apply that knowledge and understanding. And is another good way to help them improve. They need to justify what they're, identify, the answer to the question. So which question is it? And provide reasons or justify the reasons for their choice. When I was talking about checklists, this can be easily adapted across different subjects. And it's about using this criteria to assess the sample answers or even their own. So, for example, uses business terminology with skill and understanding. So is it at a poor, a basic, a good, or a great level? Is referring to the relevant syllabus dot points. It's using topic sentences to link back to the question. Adopts a structure to match the directive term in the question. Refers to appropriate business case studies or examples. The content or information presented is accurate and the sentences are concise and well structured. So as you can see, it's very easily adaptable to any course and is a really quick and easy task that can be used to help students identify those really important areas they need to be including in their responses. But also that reflection and having them reflect on what the response does well, and then also what the weaknesses of the response are. Another example of a checklist that I have here that again can be easily adaptable across courses, and it's once they've written their response And students use this tool as a way to self-assess before they're handing it to anyone else to check. And again, that's something that our students don't often do as a tool when they're editing. So if we can work through with them to create these explicit checklists that they use, it will make a difference, because not only can they use it, as I mentioned before, to self-assess, but then they can use it to peer assess as well. And it helps them to identify those areas of strength and those areas of weaknesses that need improvement before it's being submitted. So finally, what I wanted to show you is just one other activity, and then I'd like you to do one as a practice. So what I've taken is some HSC workbook exemplars from legal studies and PDHPE. And it's important not to worry about that these courses aren't your subject areas, because it's the skill that we're looking at. It's not the content. And we're looking at how we are showing the relationship between the rubric, the question, the directive terms and what they're meaning, the marking criteria, and how they're being applied in the response. So it's not so much about needing to have an understanding of the content as we read it, it's looking for those key elements. So I've annotated, I've color-coded some responses to highlight where the different points are being incorporated throughout. So in yellow is the directive term. So in this response for legal studies, it's an evaluate. And the question's asking students to evaluate the effectiveness of both legal and non-legal responses to one contemporary human rights issue. I've included the directive term and what it means. So with an evaluation, we want students to make a judgment based on criteria or to determine the value. In the examination rubric, which obviously comes through the extended responses, but I've used it here just as another way to keep highlighting back to students the importance of understanding it, because you can link them into the short or many of the short answer questions as well. So again, the light blue is demonstrating the links to the question and the terminology and the syllabus, whereas the yellow is providing links to the directive term and where that's being applied. So you can see in the marking criteria, if we're looking at the top mark range, students need to demonstrate an extensive understanding of one contemporary human rights issue. So that's clearly connected to the syllabus. But in order to demonstrate that they have evaluated, they must make an informed judgment using criteria about the effectiveness of legal and non-legal responses to a contemporary human rights issue. And you can see in the 2 to 3 range where PDHPE had indicated that our students were sitting in the short answers because they were not applying the directive terms. It stops here. If they do not apply the term, they cannot move above this mark range because they're making statements about legal or non-legal responses. But to be in the 4 and 5 mark range, they must attempt a judgment. So we need to be very explicit in the way we teach them to do that. I've provided the sample answer from the HSC marking criteria as well that students could read. I've made the connection to where it falls within the syllabus, because again, it's so important that students are using the syllabus to guide them in the way they're using their language and terminology and what content they're drawing on for their response. And then here I've highlighted where it's being demonstrated. So the blue, again, is linking to the syllabus content, and the yellow is highlighting where they've made judgments and where it's been supported. So I'd like you to read through that yourself and see what you think. I'll just show you a PDH PE exemplar as well. So I've done the same structure. So I've included the question. So this one is an explain. And it's explain how athletes in a range of different sports physically prepare to prevent injury. And it's an 8-mark question. So for students to demonstrate the directive term, they must relate either the cause and effect or make the relationship between things evident and provide the why and or how. So when we're looking at the rubric, students need to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of health and physical activity concepts that are relevant to the question, and they need to apply skills of critical thinking and analysis. When we apply that to the marking criteria, the directive term is shown by making the relationship evident between an athlete's physical preparation and their prevention of injury, which obviously is linking to the syllabus because it's highlighted in blue. Providing relevant examples in a range of different sports that again demonstrate the relationship between physical preparation and injury prevention. For students to be able to access the higher mark ranges and demonstrate that they have explained, the first step for that is here because they're looking at characteristics and features, but of how. So it's more of a describe, but they're just linking in by including a how into that explanation. Whereas here, they're just outlining, they're just providing, a sketch in general terms of how athletes prevent injury. And again, as Paul had highlighted in his data analysis, this is where our students are sitting. And so no matter how well they know the content, if they don't have the skill of applying the directive term, they will not move above these lower bands or mark range bands here. Again, I've included the sample answer. I've linked to the syllabus to highlight the importance, and then highlighted the sample response so they can actually see the application of the syllabus and the content, but also where the directive term is being utilised. And you can see just visually that students could get a really good understanding of how consistent that application needs to be in order to access the higher mark ranges. So doing this activity with them is a really valuable way of using the time, but you can clearly see that you are able to teach the content through this exam technique, or teach the content, through the exam technique. And that's really important. So I've provided another response here, and it's a to what extent question. And really that links into an assess, and it's about making a judgment of the value, the quality, the outcomes, or the results or size. And it's linking specifically to the needs of children and young athletes and how they can participate safely in sport. And that's the content connection to the syllabus. So again, followed the same structure, which I'd like you to read through. I've used the rubric and highlighted the key components. I've drawn the relationship to the marking criteria so students can clearly see the connections between the question, the directive term, the rubric, and the criteria. Again here, you can see that if students do not make evident and show, like make the judgments around the specific needs of children and athletes, they're really not able to access the higher bands. 5 to 7, they're describing. 3 to 4, they're outlining. So we need to be able to have students access those higher order thinking skills in order to improve their results. I've included a sample answer for them to review as well. And again, made the links to the syllabus. And then followed that same process of highlighting to draw their attention to the application of syllabus content and dot points and where the directive term has been applied. So I'd like you to take the time to read through these responses and look at how you can construct responses in a similar way for your students to review for each of your courses. I have an activity that I'd like you to complete at the end of this PDHPE exemplar as well. So I've provided a final question where I'd like you to complete this. And again, it's an activity that you can have like build in for your students. So where you could do some exemplars with them that are already completed and then ask them to do their own, demonstrate that understanding. So here I'd like you to identify what the term discuss means and then make the connection between the rubric and the marking criteria. Look at what syllabus dot points it connects to and then highlight this information using the highlighting tool in throughout the response and see how you go. I hope these strategies are helpful for you. It is really important that we be consistent in our approach. So the three strategies that we've identified are embedding the definitions, improving the application of the directive terms, and using exemplar responses or model responses in order to build students' skill and understanding. If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask, and I'm more than happy to support anyone with wanting to put together exemplars for their students to be using.